Hello everyone. So I was watching this video from Amigoscode. This is why your code is slow. So he talks about the usage of wrappers, preferring to use primitives over wrappers. Uh, he talks about how slow they are, and you should always aim to use the primitive instead. And he does some tests and shows how fast it gets. So let's see. Uh, try to reproduce his test here. I know it's the same exactly script that is presented in effective Java book. The author talks about the same exact problem. So my grape is precisely with the you should always prefer. I think correct answer is more nuanced here, and let's see if I can show that. So the first the situation that we have is that we have a long here, the wrapper class and not the primitive, and it takes in my case almost 8 seconds to run. And if you just replace that with primitive and run again, then you see that the result is much faster. It's almost at order of magnitude faster, so 10 times faster, which is quite cool. But let's see, is that really how fast it can go? No, it can go much faster than that. So this is the same result, the same value is returned with this code. What I did here, I understood the problem that is being tried to fix, right? To be what is being described here. So in the original case here we have a loop from 0 to max integer. So and then a sum of all the values on that range. That can be represented with the same equation. So a single equation here instead of a loop. Props to the guy that in the comments that pointed out this. So I did not thought about that. I just copied the same mathematical expression. What I want to point out with this, right? Can you go further? Yes, this is a fixed value. It never changes. It's a fixed value. It will never change. So you don't even need to do the math here. You can just return the value, right? Of course, this is absurd, and then it's very fast, right? It's absurdly fast. So if you want to go fast, reduce your basically reduce your script to the right thing instead of doing loops, right? It's a silly proposition. Of course, I'm being facetious here. Okay, so what are we really doing here? It's obvious that it's not a common thing to do in business, to loop from 0 to max integer. It's not normal, right? If you're dealing with such big numbers, you should think about what are you doing with this. So you should consider the business. What is that you're aiming to do? In some cases, you should use wrapper class. And why? Well, because you're dealing with things that you want to guarantee that are not changed. What is the importance of a immutable, which is, I think, the feature here that is causing the problem. The fact that this is immutable, right? The wrapper class is immutable. Every time it does a sum, it needs to instantiate a new instance of long, right? To perform that sum, because it cannot change this value. This class is immutable, meaning that if you want to add 1 to it, it will create a new instance. So you need to instantiate integer max value times long, and that's your bottleneck there, right? That's not realistic, right? So, but why should you use primitives over, or should you use immutables over primitives, mutables, right? There's some situations where you have like one instance, for example, of a date, and then you have a created at, and then you want to know how many days in the future, if which date it will be 5 days from the created date, right? I want to know if this is valid still, right? So I want to if the created date elapsed 5 days or not. I want to do that comparison. So I take the object, and then I do add 5 days, and then I compare the new object, the new value with with the current date if I want, and then I do if my test is successful, I do change some other fields, and then I persist the new fields. What's going to happen if the date is not immutable? Well, I'm going to save the created date with +5. That's what is going to happen, because although I'm trying to calculate the date and compare it with something else, if I'm changing the original, I'm also changing the reference. So I'm changing in the entity. That's the problem that immutables try to fix. Usually you use immutables with things that are important: dates, money, anything that you manipulate the thing often, and then you want to preserve the original one. So you should not always prefer primitives, of course. You should think about the situation. And this example is silly. It does not represent reality. It's not common for you to iterate over max value. It's absurd, right? Nobody does that. Okay, sometimes we do. In an edge case, somebody might do that, right? I never did this. This is a case where in my, I don't know, almost 20 years of business in software development, I never had to iterate over max value, right? So it's a silly proposition. Often enough, this is like a 10,000 perhaps, or 50 or 20, and then the difference here is neglectable. And then at that point, I would say if it's not impacting performance, or it's impacting like let's compare that. Let's really compare that. Let's say we have 1,000. Let's say we have 1,000. It takes uh, less than a millisecond, half a millisecond. But let's replace that with long uh, primitive. It's much faster, yes. Okay, we cut down that half millisecond to a tenth of a millisecond, which is pretty cool. But let's say that your page takes 100 milliseconds to render. What's the difference? What's half a millisecond will make in your page? Nothing. Really, it's not going to do nothing. But cumulatively, you can see some benefits, perhaps. But I much prefer the idea of having my data safe than caring about performance, and that's a strategy that Martin Fowler talks about. You should prefer a well-factored code instead of performative code, because often enough, uh, when you do a profiler over your code, you find out that the problem that is causing is not what you guessed is, right? So when you do a profiler, you find out that there's a bottleneck somewhere, and then you fix that bottleneck, you fix everything. So do a profiler first, and instead of caring about trying to figure out if this small bit of code is fast enough or not. Basically, do not spend time thinking about half milliseconds while you're coding. Uh, Prefer to use the thing that is safer for you, even though this is a small trade-off, or be very aware of what data you're dealing with, and then use the appropriate object. If scalar, if immutable, if primitive, it's not a problem. Just be aware. So I think that the nuanced response for amigos there is don't be so uh, uh, so one-sided. It's not always preferred, right? It's always think about the situation, and depending on the situation, go to one side or the other. But basically, it's do not, if you want to do like a rule of thumb, that one is very safe, I think. Do not try to optimize software before you know what you're optimizing. In my experience, more often than not, 99% of the time, but that's experience and not benchmarks. You get you be optimizing the wrong thing. You'll be wasting your time. And then once you run the profile, you can get like a 10 times upgrade in update in performance, which is ludicrous with some seconds of. There's even a case described in refactoring where a guy spends, I think, 3 or 4 days trying to discuss with other people, trying to figure out how to optimize it piece of code, and then Kent Beck runs a profiler, and in one day he optimizes the whole thing. So that's it for today, guys. And it's a different type of video in my channel. If you like, I can do more like that. See you. Bye bye.